Bonjour à tous. J'aimerais vous dire la bienvenue au forum InCyber 2023, le premier panel sur la scène bleue aujourd'hui qui s'intitule Le rôle essentiel des nombres dans la gestion des risques et de la cybersécurité. Nos panélistes sont pour la plupart anglophones, donc le reste de la présentation se fera en anglais. Si vous avez besoin de traduction, vous pouvez mettre votre casque d'écoute au canal 4. Welcome everybody. I would like to introduce our speaker for today. We have to my right Valecia STOCCHETTI, who is a senior cybersecurity engineer for the Center for Internet Security. We have Nada Tamim, who is la coordonnatrice de programme à la RAMQ du Québec. And we have Victor BEITNER, who is the founder of the Cybersecurity Canada NFFP. And the moderator for this panel, who will be with you for the rest of 45 minutes, is Tashya DENOSE, who is the Senior Security Program Manager with Meta. With this, Tashya, all yours.
Good morning, everyone. In a world of digital threats are evolving at an unprecedented rate, it is important that we have a foundation of governance, and that lies in our cybersecurity standards. Can you guys hear me? We good? Today, I have three experts to talk about how their perspective is on the field of how essential it is to have cybersecurity standards. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to get it started with the first question I wanted to ask you, Victor. Yes, you first. We're going to jump out there. In what ways do international cybersecurity standards facilitate global interoperability?
It's a very big question.
It is.
What we have with standards, we have the International Standards Organization, which has created standards for practically almost everything today. When it comes to cyber, they have the 27001, which is the internationally recognized standard. And in Europe, most organizations need to have this certification to actually do business in Europe. They want to make sure that they have something. The organizations requiring your input, whether as a vendor, whatever. Oh, they can't. Oh, sorry. I can yell, but no. Okay. So ISO is recognized more so in Europe because it's mandatory for most organizations to become standardized in the cyber world, and they follow the 27001 process. So Canada, we don't. Organizations are going through this process now because they're mandated to go to do business in Europe. But for Canadian businesses, the only thing we have today was developed in Canada is the Cybersecure Canada program, which we're one of the certification bodies for at least that program, and we're trying to promote it internationally because it is a baseline, it's a starting point. It's not as intensive as the ISOs, and it is a standard.
So piggybacking off of that, one of the things Victor was saying is the differences between all of the standards across the globe and how not everyone has the same standards. I wanted to go to you, Nada, and ask, how do you feel about choosing different standards? We're talking about interoperability. Can you give our audience some insight into the difference of your thoughts on NIST as a global standard? He was speaking of ISO. Can you get a little bit deeper into that?
Yes, thank you. It's interesting. Sometimes people think I have to choose this framework or that framework. It's not about choosing which framework to go to. They're all here to help you manage your risk. So the first thing to do is look at your own organization, look at your own risk, understand what are the different operations you have in place, what is it at stake, and then take a look at what's out there. You have standards that are like ISO, they're international, and they're really about, a structured way to position yourself and show compliance. And it follows the ISO methodology. Now you have NIST. NIST is not really a standard. You can make it a standard if you apply it. You can align with NIST. NIST is pretty much a way to look at your risk and manage it in a risk methodology. So what they did is they came up with, you have 6 categories, 6 functions. These 6 functions that recently they were 5, now they're 6. You have the governance, you have identification of your assets. So what I'm trying to say, each framework out there or each approach targets one aspect of your organization. It can talk to your operations if they're only about internet operation. You can go just with the CIS. So really, you need to know what is out there, understand these frameworks, these standards, and see how they apply to you and how they answer your own needs. I mentioned NIST, I mentioned ISO. People make the mistake, there is the SOC 2 standard, there is the SOC 2. It's not a standard. It's an assessment that you do for your own controls to do some sanity check and be able to be out there bidding to have this assurance. So bottom line is we need to look at these tools, look at our risk posture, risk situation, and then pick and choose. You can pick 2, 3 of these and adapt it and make your own standard.
Wow.
So standards alone mean nothing. That's my statement. It's how you adapt it and how it makes sense to your operations and governance.
That was key. Did everybody hear one of the most important things that she said to me was our organizations must look at these standards and apply them, right? Not everything is one size fits all. So you need to be choosing what works best for your organization, what applies to your business, right? So one of the key words that you said during your reply was compliance, right? I want to go to you. Yes, compliance of these. I want to go to you, Valecia. I have a very important question. I believe you have good opinions on this. Does compliance to these standards equal security?
Right. Well, first, good morning, everyone. I do want to offer one correction. My new title is actually not Senior Cybersecurity Engineer. I'm an Information Security Auditor or Security Manager for the Center for Internet Security. So I'm newer to the audit field, but this is something that I actually came from an operational background, and now working in audit, it's a very different world for me because I've always been very security focused and not so much compliance focused, and there is a difference, obviously. So with the audit life cycle, right, it's a reactive process. You're finding things that are wrong, you're fixing them, maybe sometimes on the fly, and then going through the whole process again. But with risk management, it's much different. And with security, right? So your risk management is more of an iterative process. It's not supposed to be a visceral reaction to what an auditor finds or what you find internally during an audit. And so there's this concept of security doesn't equal compliance. It's a very important part of it, but it is not the only part of it. So one of the things that we actually did a lot of work with was MITRE ATT&CK. And that, to me, is putting a very human element, or not human element, I shouldn't say, a very real-world example of what can happen when your security controls fail. And you don't really get that out of the normal audit cycle, right? Unless you're doing mappings to the MITRE ATT&CK framework or some other, well, really, MITRE ATT&CK is the only framework out there right now, unless there's something better that comes along. But the one thing is effective implementation also. So one of the examples I want to give is, say you're going through an audit and they're telling you to implement a configuration setting. You go through that audit, you determine that that configuration setting is not on, turned on, implemented correctly, whatever. You have the person fix it, and you come back and find out that it's no longer actually set to what you thought it was supposed to be set to. Somebody turned it back to what it was prior to the finding. How do you know that that changed, right? Are you going to wait for your next audit cycle? I sure hope not, because you'll probably be in some hot water. So we have to make sure that we're doing this concept of continuous monitoring, right? Making sure that we're trusting but verifying, because much as I love everyone that I work with, sometimes things happen. Somebody turns on one thing, they turn off the next one from the next person, roles switch, things happen and they change. So having that baseline is good to determine when that change occurs, which will help you with your risk management program.
So one of the key things I hear when you're presenting, it sounds like it's also a cultural change that happens. We can't just be one of those things that we're doing on one-time basis. Security is a cultural change. So Victor, tell me from your perspective, how do you foster a culture that values adherence to this?
Okay, sorry. Yeah. It's very interesting on the culture side, because it has to start at the top. Management has to say, listen, we're going to do this, right? And once they've accepted the fact that it's going to cost them money, it's going to cost time and resources to create the culture, which would include, a lot of awareness training, or a lot of training or retraining with the technologies, because everything's evolving. And every time I look at LinkedIn, it changes. They hide things. So you have to constantly learn all these patching and upgrades of software. So there has to be something that you've got to motivate the people to adapt to the new changes that are happening, and especially with security, because it evolves so quickly. People have to understand that you have things set one way, and then like she was saying earlier, that someone turned something on because it's needed, but then something else turned off, right? And someone has to say, okay, I turned this on, now what are the repercussions? So they have to look at it. They have to make sure they're aware of all the implications of all the simple changes that are happening. It's so again, as a culture, everyone has to understand that they're there to keep their jobs, to protect the organization. If the organization fails for whatever reason, it could be because someone turned a switch off, or they disabled, say, multi-factor on an admin, which we've seen, and the world practically comes to an end because there's a major takeover, and people have to understand these little things have to be thought about, and this is all cultural. They have to understand what they're doing every day.
Nada, would you like to add on, and what are your thoughts on how culture impacts cybersecurity in an organization?
Well, culture, it breaks it or makes it for me. When you say culture, you make reference to leadership model. You refer to how the organic nature of how an organization, be it public, be it private, what are les us, les coutumes. Sorry, some French is kicking in. So all this impacts on how cybersecurity is taken. And when you say culture as well, you think, okay, follow the leader. It's what the leader puts in place to foster cybersecurity resilient organization, cyber resilience, or is it a detached leadership that is delegating to the risk committee or delegating to the chief information officer everything? So culture is really key, and it relies on active leadership and involvement, if not ownership, actual ownership by the conseil d'administration, excuse me, by the board. So, talking about, well, you're leading me this into another subject that because of this issue of culture, if it's not there, if it's not fostered and taken care of, cybersecurity suffers. So you would have delinquency that would lead to incident, to breaches, and you would lose business. There's no credibility. So culture is very important. Yeah.
So two things that you guys said to follow up. I love that, Victor, when you were saying training and bringing awareness, and then you're saying from the leadership's perspective. Valencia, can you tell us how organizations ensure that there's consistent implementation of compliance and standards? Like how do we get that going?
Yeah, so, excuse me, I merged my answers a little bit. I had talked just recently about making sure that you're assessing the implementation over time with that continuous monitoring. But as far as ensuring consistent implementation, you really want to make sure that, it's not just about the cadence that you're testing it, right? So making sure that if you notice a deviation sooner rather than later, if there's a threat out there that is more prevalent at the time, that you're not just waiting for that next audit cycle to come up to actually, do something about it. But the one thing I wanted to say too about the culture, if you don't mind if I could touch on that, is that I think the other thing is what I'm finding, at least in my new role, is really the relationship building and the communication are key. So if I come in as an audit manager, I'm not like this big scary person that's coming in like putting down the hammer and telling you that you need to do X, Y, and Z. What I like to do is my approach is go in and make it a personal effort, right? Like I'm a human, you're a human, we both have a job to do. It's not about me telling you what to do. I should be able to recognize what that person's limitations are if they don't have resources or the budget to do what they're trying to do, and make it that human element, because if not, then people are going to be more resilient to doing what, you want them to do. I mean, I have a 4-year-old. If I want my 4-year-old to do something, I have to explain why, right? Like she's not just going to do it because I tell her to do it. And for those with children or nieces or nephews or grandchildren in the audience, I'm sure that you could probably sympathize with that. And, it's just making sure that you're keeping that open line of communication, because at the end of the day, you have to work together to get things done. It can't be developed and done in a vacuum.
I love it. One of the things that you said at the beginning was, I interpreted it as being agile, right? Moving standards may be a one-time thing, but our implementation of those standards are not. So I really love that you said that. I want to ask you, and then I'll go to Victor. Do you believe our standards are able to keep up with our evolving risks?
The pessimist in me wants to say no. But I think that as long as we continue what we're doing and pushing forward, hopefully we'll get there. But the problem is that, take AI, for example. I just went to a conference where they were talking about AI. Everyone has probably heard something in the past 3 months about AI. And, the threats that are out there are really it's like two trains going at two different speeds, right? We're the train that's like trying to keep up with the attackers, and sometimes it's working against us. Eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to get maybe past it. But the problem is with a hacker or an attacker, they don't care, right? They're not complying to anything. They're just doing whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And so, we all have other jobs too, other than just maybe compliance or audit or whatnot. So it's kind of like competing resources almost, I think. I think the one thing is with AI especially, if there's more standards around it, hopefully it'll be a little bit more corralled in the sense of, not becoming such a convoluted web like some other things, but it's hard. Like, standards take time.
Victor, and then
Yeah. So standards keeping up is, I think standards are where you start. It should be a baseline. With ISO, the motto is continuous improvement. So if the standard says you do something, it's just the standard. Like, this is your starting point. So the standards may not adapt as quickly as technology is, but at least if you have a base to start with, then you build on it. So, like today, and I'm talking because I'm in Canada and we audit the Cybersecurity program. Passwords are very critical. They're part of NIST and ISO. Everyone's talking about password management, password, password managers. That's going to change, and it's going to change in the very near future because now we're going passwordless. So we're going to be using our devices to authenticate ourselves, either biometrics or retinal scans, whatever. So that shift is happening, and some of the standards, they have a review cycle that is very long term. I think ISO could be up to 5 years, like 27001 was just revised in 2022. And it took many years for it to catch up with the new changes. In Canada, we actually have a review cycle of once a year, and one of the things I'm going to bring up to it is the fact that the passwords are changing. So we're trying to get it to adapt a little faster than the other standards, because if you stand still, the world's going to go by you, right? So.
not to follow that. We stand still, the world is going to go by us. That is major. I know you had some thoughts on passwords. Not passwords, on passwordless. That's important. I wanted to ask you how you feel about, you had touched on it earlier, what's leadership's role in all of this? How can we get leadership to get on board with making sure standards are complied to?
I would like to mention here in this specific context, like what ISO would say. So for ISO, in their approach, they have expectation out of leadership, and they coin it in clause 5.1. I would invite you to go check it. It's available online, and they really pull on the leadership role and accountability. So they instill all these concepts of where leadership fits in the cybersecurity realm. So I would just mention a couple of these expectations. So the commitment of leadership, and this is not limited to, accountability for the effectiveness of the management system. They need to ensure the policy objectives are established. They need to ensure the integration of management system are embedded into business processes. So it goes into the guts of the organization. And the standard expects the leadership to own these things. They're accountable for this. And they expect them to promote the use of process approach and risk-based thinking, and et cetera, et cetera. This is what ISO says. Now, if you take it on any risk that compromises the reputation of an organization, you would obviously go to, okay, leadership should own it. It's not something that the IT or infrastructure, with all due respect to these guys, that cybersecurity was born there, but it's not owned. They're not accountable for it. They're responsible to deliver the infrastructure, the tools, all the intelligence, what's happening, but who owns it at the end of the day? Who's accountable to ensure the organization, the processes of the organization, policies, culture, everything? It's the board of directors, the CEO, and through their communication, through their vision, through their strategy, they need to have cybersecurity at the center, and if they want to deliver their vision. Let's take, for example, an organization that's full swing in transformation. So just imagine a whole strategy for transformation where security is delegated just to the IT infrastructure. So what happens to risk? What happens to all the controls in the processes they're deploying? What's happening in all the contracts they're signing with the providers? Is there any controls? No. So what the standards bring is these controls, and what the standards and the frameworks and everything, they bring the accountability way up there to ensure the transversality of cybersecurity ownership and at which level. You would have the leadership, and then as the third level of defense, and then you have the auditors as your second, and your first is where you deploy your measures. So this full cycle, leadership through the audit all the way down to operations where they deploy the controls, be it the IT or HR or whatever, we need to close the circle so it gets us the transversal accountability, and they deliver cybersecurity and a cyber resilient organization.
I like it.
Something you said really sparked something in me, is that I heard it actually the other week. We have to stop thinking of cybersecurity as some separate business decision, right? You go and you own a business. Cybersecurity is going to touch every single facet of what you do, your systems, your people, your processes. And so one of the things that, this person had said that I was talking to is that we have to just integrate it into everything that we're doing and not keep thinking about it as a separate issue. So if we're going to HR, they're going to have
has that understanding, we will be doing these things effectively. I have a new question I wanted to ask you guys. We are at a global conference, right? And we've touched on different standards and required standards that are needed where we are. I want to go through and ask each one of you, what are the current standards that you're looking at and that impact your day-to-day work life? What are those standards?
So, as a certification body, we audit the Cybersecure program, which is the Canadian standard. Also, the 27K. We focus strictly on cyber. To repeat the question again, because I'm thinking about something that was said before, and now my mind just jumped.
What are so in Canada, are there required standards that you have to
Oh.
follow or anything like that? What are the standards you're working with on a daily?
For requirements, it's all voluntary. ISO, Cybersecure, or CANSOC 104. It's a voluntary standard. What we're finding is when people come to us to go through the audit process, they've been requested by their clients. We have a few companies that they have large contracts that are dependent on getting at least this started. You know, they plan to go 27,000, they plan to go CMMC, which will be next year will be mandatory for any defense contracts, either Canadian or US. So the CMMC, or it's going to be in Canada, the Canadian Program for Cybersecurity Certification. It's currently being developed by DND in Canada and CSE, lots of acronyms, managed through SEC, another acronym, which is Standards Council of Canada. So the three of them are going to be managing that program, and we'll be addressing that once the DoD, Department of Defense in the US, says, yes, this works for us. And now we have a true bilateral agreement so that an organization that gets certified in Canada can sell without a problem into the United States and vice versa.
So I have two answers. One on a personal level and one general level. So the general one, culture. In the States, you have a culture of standards and compliance, and you have all these checks in place. In Canada, we're more regulation. We follow regulation. We follow the law. The law said we apply, at least for cybersecurity that I know. Recently, there is the defense contracting. We're following your model in the States, down south. But the industry is pushing for, okay, guys, regulation, it takes forever for law. We need standards. So we've been complaining now that standards are slow. And we want standards here because they're faster than laws. Now, this is on the culture global in here in Canada. On a personal level, I'm more what I preach. I pick and choose. I go fetch all the controls in this in your framework, and then I keep a huge matrix that the NIST put in place that has the COBIT, it has ITIL, it has all the correspondences, and I use NIST, and I have the regulations of the cybersecurity ministry here, and I create an ecosystem of regulations mixed with standards, and this is how I approach my day-to-day work, and this is the maturity I'm bringing to the new job I joined. It makes our job more interesting. It keeps us on our toes, but that's the nature of the beast. You need to be eyes wide open, ears. We're dealing with risk. So master your risk and play with these tools. It's not something rigid. You make it, c'est comme une pâte à modeler. It's like Oh my God, I'm losing.
Like Play-Doh?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
I guessed it. Like
Thank you.
Play-Doh. Malleable, like Play-Doh. We need to use the
You
standards.
make it.
Compliance.
I love Play-Doh.
I hate Play-Doh. If you have children, don't buy your
Well,
children
in my
Play-Doh. It gets in
house,
carpets.
I hate Play-Doh, yes. I agree. That and slime. But
Managing my
anyways.
risk.
So at my company, we actually develop. It's not necessarily a standard, but it is becoming required in a lot of on the United States side. So the CIS critical security controls is actually my bread and butter, more than auditing right now, just because I worked for in that department for so long. So I actually helped develop version 8 of the controls, which is a really cool just to see from the ground up how things were created and developed. But as far as standards and regulations, we do an ISO certification for the 27000 series, PCI, NIST 800, all the typical PCI. I said PCI, but anyways, all the typical ones. But what I was going to say too is that when you're doing or up against all of these frameworks that you have to comply with, like you said, doing that mapping and that crossroads will help you alleviate some of that pressure, so you're not doing an assessment for one standard to the next standard to the next standard, because you'll be there forever. I don't think you'll ever get it done. Yeah.
I have a quick question for the audience. By a show of hands, who's here from a small business? So, and I'm guessing the rest of you are enterprise level. So I believe the way you would apply standards at your business compared to the enterprise level, what you're learning is a little bit different. So I hope that you guys have all learned that you must be agile, you must utilize standards to better fit your organization, and look these people up on LinkedIn, social media, and I hope you enjoyed our talk today. Oh, I thought you were, sorry, you guys. It's good to know standards with signals as well. So we have a 4-minute timer. Then we're going to stay right here with you. So we have last thoughts. I'm going to go around and ask last thoughts. That's perfect. And tell people where to find you.
I'm right here. The most important thing with standards, with everything you do, we try and instill in our clients continuous improvement. Start somewhere, build up whatever framework you want to work with, and then as things evolve, you continuously improve. Do the research and find there's always something new, something better. Just continuously improve your environment and things should get better.
I will throw in something like compliance, watch out of complacency. So keep the upbeat, keep it agile, keep it diverse. If you see that your organization is, if you would say probably our organization has cybersecurity functions all over the place. It's okay. Cybersecurity functions are not in one organization. If you would think you're a small organization, cybersecurity is too much for you to take on. There are solutions. There are, as I said, it's Play-Doh. You fit it to your needs. You play with the standards. You make your own standards. They put them in place for you to customize them according to your own needs. There's a lot of good stuff out there. For me, standards are not scary as long as you master them and you know how to adapt them. But if you take them like a mammoth and you try to apply them, you get yourself into more trouble. So that's my take on it.
I would say effectiveness is key, right? So if my framework says to do an IR plan and provide that plan perfect. If they say to show a list of your incidents for the past quarter, awesome. But have they actually asked you to demonstrate that your security plan is being tested? And if an incident does happen, do you even know how to respond, right? Do your people know how to respond to that? Do you have a printed copy of your incident response plan? So if you get hit with ransomware and it's encrypted, you're not sitting there going, hey, the server that my incident response plan is on is no longer actionable. But so actually practicing and making sure that those controls are effective is way more important than checking a box and just saying, I did it, I have an incident response plan. Because at the end of the day, just write 911 on a piece of paper. Like, I don't care what it is, just have a plan and tell your people what that plan is. Because I can tell you from responding to thousands of incidents with state and local governments in the U.S., it is not good when somebody doesn't have a plan, right? You don't want to get a call saying, hey, I see you're on the front page of the newspaper and what's going on? And you haven't called the media. That's when it's not good.
Yeah, and you don't want your insurance company to tell you, oh, you didn't test your plan? Well, I'm not going to insure you. So it's a totally different topic and exciting one too. So insurance people are right behind the door waiting for you to ignore cybersecurity to tell you, oh, we're not paying. So watch out.
Beware of the insurance people, as Nada said. Well, we thank you so much for your time and attention and enjoying this talk. We hope you learned a lot from it. Enjoy the rest of your time here.